We are joined once again by the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan, or SBAM, Rob Fowler, with us on the Oakland County Megacast. Rob, thank you for coming back again.
Hey, thanks, Tyler. Appreciate the invitation.
We appreciate having you on. How are you? How's your team been doing?
Team is good. We're, like a lot of our businesses, we are 100% remote. That's 27 employees, all working from home, but our obsession these days is helping small businesses navigate this crisis. We are all well, and we are all at work doing exactly that.
You've been doing this you're helping small businesses in regular times navigate the challenges that come with being a small business, just day to day in general. But during the coronavirus pandemic, your team's been really hard at work from the onset, no matter what the issue was, whether it was initially trying to get those PPP loans, or as time's gone on, trying to get people back to work as they're either eligible to come off of unemployment and the businesses are able in a financial state to have employees come back. There's so much work that's been put in from your organization to help these small businesses. How are you guys holding up, keeping that going? Is there still momentum there? Are you facing new challenges now that are different than before? And how is SBAM tackling those challenges?
Yeah, it's actually a really good point. You know, part of what we do every day before the coronavirus is advocacy on behalf of small business. So, you know, making certain that policymakers, government officials understand the impact of their rules and their laws on small business. And that's been sort of, on steroids during this whole period of time, in the sense that laws and policies and executive orders have been coming fast and furious, and they have huge impact on small businesses. And it's been really difficult for small businesses to stay informed. So part of what we did is instituted initially a daily briefing, and now a twice-a-week briefing for small businesses. We do it through our website and through Zoom, and really it's a matter of just trying to keep up to date on the things that are happening, executive orders, kind of in particular lately, and making sure that we have clarity around the small businesses, the impact on them and their responsibilities under these executive orders.
Rob Fowler with us. He's the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan. And you talk about clarity from a governmental standpoint. There's been so much that's been put in place over the course of the pandemic that has directly impacted these small businesses, whether it be the stay-at-home order, which required a lot of small businesses, particularly in retail and restaurants and so on, to be either drive-through, curbside service, whether it be now the mask order that's in place, and further complications of that and escalations of that as time has gone on. How do you navigate that? And what are your conversations with government officials been, especially on the mask order as it's been in place? Because there has been some confusion with that in terms of what these small businesses are responsible, especially the retailers, are responsible for doing and enforcing, and at what point that gray area goes away where they're doing everything that they can, but maybe they're not liable anymore.
Well, and Tyler, you're exactly right. We've actually entered into a new phase. I have been a small business advocate for 35 years. I could not literally have imagined a day would come where the government said you must close your business. That's just almost unthinkable, and we've now lived through that. And now the government is saying, in Michigan in particular, first, that every person must wear a mask and that a business must enforce it. So if someone is coming into my place of business, my responsibility is to, according to the executive order, not let them come in unless they're wearing a face mask, and not provide them service if they come in without a face mask. Now, there are some exemptions or exceptions to that. We've spent a lot of time trying to help the employer understand the limit, the extent of their responsibility here. So, for example, the executive order literally says you cannot allow them to come in. There were two mask executive orders. The first one, for anybody who's keeping score, is 2020-147. And then less than a week later, 153 came along that replaced 147, mostly the same things. But the one clarification was some businesses had been given legal advice or advice from from their association or others that said, if somebody comes into your business without a mask, you can assume that they meet one of the exceptions, and particularly the medically unable to tolerate a face covering. That's a broad exception. And the new executive order says to a business, you cannot assume that. You must ask someone to wear a mask. And if they tell you that they have an exception, that they are medically unable to tolerate, then you can let them come in, you can provide them service. And it actually puts small businesses in a tough spot. These are generally frontline staff, employees who have no training in de-escalation, and you couple that with people who are just ticked off about having to wear a mask, and it really creates a bad situation for a lot of businesses. And the tricky spot is you must ask them to wear a mask. If they tell you that I have an exception or an exemption, you can accept that. You don't have to understand it anymore. And in fact, you can't ask them what their medical condition is, because then you risk running afoul of some other laws, like the Americans with Disabilities Act, HIPAA, privacy laws, and those sort of things. So you really can't pry into what is your medical condition. You have to ask, and then you accept when someone tells you, I have a medical condition that makes it so that I cannot tolerate a face covering. So all that to say, we've been just trying to clarify what the business's responsibility is. They have no responsibility to, physically remove someone or demand that someone leave their premises if they're not wearing a face covering and they believe they have an exception.
So, Rob, if I can ask you, because these are confusing times, are you recommending that they keep a log and maybe a description of the individual who came in, and they asked them if they had one and they said, I have an exemption? Because other words, then it's kind of just them saying, oh, no, they told me they had an exemption. Or even is signage enough these days, or no?
Well, the responsibility of the employer is to put up a sign, to ask at the door, and to not provide service if someone doesn't claim to meet one of the exceptions. So for example, under 5 is one of those. A child under 5 is exempt from wearing a face covering, but you don't have to ask their age. If they say he or she is under 5, you can accept that. So, Ronnie, the question actually gets a little more complicated in certain businesses, personal services, and this would be haircuts and salons and some of those sort of things. You are actually expected to keep a log of your clients. That is essentially for contact tracing purposes if something were to happen. But if you run a retail store or a restaurant or a grocery store, you're not expected to keep a log, and not even a log of those who claim a medical exemption. So fortunately, it is not in a small business's instinct, it's not in their DNA to say, you can't come into my business and spend your money here. They would want to do anything they can to keep that from happening. And they certainly don't want to tick off a good customer who may never come back and may talk badly about them to other people. That's not the spot any small business owner wants to be in. So this sort of enforcement of the state policy, the state law, is a really awkward spot for a lot of small businesses. We're advocating to get out of that role as quickly as we possibly can. We support mask wearing, we support social distancing, and most small businesses have employed those things inside their business voluntarily and will continue to do so. But it really puts small businesses in a tough spot. We're afraid that we're going to see a lot of lawsuits and some liability, and there is an effort both in the state legislature and in the Congress to provide some protections to employers from liability if they follow the rules.
Rob Fowler with us. He's the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan, otherwise known as SBAM. So as you're navigating that, because you have to follow these rules, these businesses can lose their license if they are found to not be following these rules, and so it's absolutely critical for their future to be following them. It's necessary that we wear masks to protect ourselves and protect the public, and it's good for business because if your customers are getting sick, they're not coming back in. But at the same time, you have that balance of providing for the customers and not alienating the customers while enforcing these rules that keep your business operating legally. So what suggestions in that case is your organization giving these small businesses to navigate that, maintaining their public relations and their customer relations while also maintaining legality in this very gray area?
Yeah, it's a great question, Tyler. And I think one of the things we've been trying to encourage businesses is to find some way to accommodate a customer. Be clever, be creative. I mean, again, it's not any business's instinct to turn away a customer who's trying to come to their business. So if someone simply refuses to wear a mask, they just refuse. They declare that they are a patriot and a freedom lover, and they're not going to be pushed around by the government, and we fully get that instinct. Can you figure out another way to serve them? Can you do the shopping for them? Can you do curbside? Can you do delivery? We're encouraging businesses to first and foremost try to serve your customer within the law, and to try to work around these situations. This is just about accommodation. If somebody doesn't feel comfortable coming into your business because somebody is in your business who's not wearing a face mask, can you accommodate that? Accommodate that. That's really our advice: is be creative, be clever, help serve your customers, understand the law and the rules here. Make sure you have the signage. Make sure you keep social distancing and do the face coverings. But when that is a problem for a customer, do whatever you can to work around it.
Rob, if we could for a second shift away from the customers that they're serving over to employees. Are they having a hard time getting employees? What about employees returning? And how are these businesses, and what advice are you giving to them when it comes to the employees if they're not comfortable coming back, and should they be requiring that they get tested?
Well, and thank you for raising it, because that's a whole different set of issues. And in some ways, we've been at this a little bit longer. That is to say, this new executive order put employers in the position of having to make certain that their customers are following these rules. But for some time, they've had to make certain that their employees are. And again, it's for good reason. A business should want to take care of its employees, make sure they're safe and well. And the rules are pretty clear about what you have to do there. You have to do medical screening. You have to provide PPE. You have to give them social distance within the workplace. You have to make certain you clean surfaces and do those sort of things. So an employer has good reason to make certain that people are safe. But and then their customers will acknowledge that the employees there are doing the right things, and then the customers will feel safe. So lots of employers are having trouble with their employees actually keeping the mask up, doing those sort of things. Customers see that, and then they're uncomfortable. So it really does behoove a business to make certain that all their employees are following the rules. One of the things we are now experiencing is the issue that we saw coming. A lot of people saw coming, and that is people who are on unemployment and have the additional unemployment provided by the federal government of $600 a week on top of Michigan's unemployment are making more money on unemployment than they would be coming back to work in some cases. And that has made it very, very difficult for small businesses to get their employees to come back. Now that's ending next week. So unless the Congress extends that unemployment benefit at $600, I think it will be much easier to get people to come back to work. And I get it. I fully understand people will do what's in their best interest. This is a public policy. It's a decision of the Congress. And whenever it is more lucrative to not work than to work, people will rightly choose that option. We get it. So we can't make it more lucrative to not be working at the moment. So lots of employers, small businesses, are having trouble getting people to come back so that they can serve their customers and ramp back up as the customers feel comfortable enough coming back.
Rob Fowler with us. He is the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan, with us on the Oakland County MegaCast. Rob, a few weeks back, we were in a position where gyms and fitness centers were preparing to reopen. Many of those are small businesses or small business-owned franchisees, and had the rug kind of pulled out from under them when the courts ruled in favor of Governor Whitmer's previous rulings that the gyms were not going to be permitted to open due to safety reasons. Many have continued to pivot to virtual classes or to outdoor fitness classes with social distancing measures in place. We spoke earlier on this week with a local small fitness business about what they're doing, and some impressive stuff. But these gyms are still really struggling in some capacity when they don't have people coming back in the gyms. People maybe are moving to cancel their memberships, which could affect them later down the line. How are our small business-owned gyms in the state of Michigan faring at this point in time, as we're several weeks past the point where they were not allowed to reopen?
Well, I think my sympathies go to the companies, the businesses right now who still haven't been allowed to reopen it. So it's theaters, it's gyms and fitness facilities and spas who haven't been allowed to reopen. So imagine, again, the government tells you that you must close your business for going on 5 months. And that means you have no income unless you've been able to pivot into some, but you're not making the kind of revenue that you made before this. You didn't prepare for it because nobody really saw this coming. You probably have blown through any sort of reserve savings, whatever that you had, and you probably have applied for the PPP and other assistance, but you are running out of air. And I believe if this continues to go on, we will lose entire industries that will have a heck of a time coming back. And I think small gyms and fitness facilities, small theaters, I really worry for those kinds of companies. I think we haven't begun to see the economic damage of this whole thing in retail restaurants. A lot of them will not survive this. They just simply won't. And I don't think we've fully comprehended the economic damage. I think the longer offices don't go back, are all remote, the more downtowns all across our state who don't have those office workers, then the restaurants and bars and coffee shops and retail are hurting. And this is it's a fundamental sort of reshaping of our economy that's happening right before our eyes. And again, I don't know that we have yet appreciated the damage that has been done. So my heart goes out to gym owners and others who continue to be shut down by the order of the government and probably have exhausted the government's help and still are in trouble.
So what more can be done at this point then to move that needle forward? There's got to be a way that these businesses can reopen in some capacity, even if it's in partial capacity, do so safely, because the reasons that they're closed are mostly scientific and are mostly for public safety reasons. But at the same time, these are people's lives that are impacted by this financially, and many people, employees, employers alike, are going to be struggling continuously after this pandemic because of this, as it's expected to go on through the rest of the year. But there's got to be some middle ground there. Is there any hope that can be found, or any action that's currently in place to move that needle forward?
Well, I think a couple of things. One, the Congress is considering a sort of a second round of employer assistance, and we're working very closely with our congressional delegation on that. Later today, we'll have Congressman Upton on our briefing to talk about what's going on there. But we've actually called on local governments. The reality is there's the restriction is on inside your building, how many people you can have, what kind of capacity, et cetera. But those same restrictions are not true outside your building. If you can have a large patio, get your customers outside. The restrictions are lessened as long as you can keep people apart from each other. So we've really called on local governments to make your government public space available to your businesses. We know of communities who close down streets to allow restaurants to come out into the street. I would say the same thing about any park, any public space, to make outdoor public space, to make it available to gyms, to theaters, to anybody else who is we've got to rethink this relationship between public space and private space, at least in this interim, so that I just simply would encourage local governments to be thinking about how they can make outdoor space available to their businesses so their businesses survive.
Rob, thank you very much for being with us today.
It's a pleasure. Thanks.